The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip.
The uproar this Wednesday night over that brazen idea to transform Gaza into an American resort.
Everybody loves it.
What that would mean for millions of Palestinians and the questions about how serious Trump really is. The goal to remove interprovincial trade barriers.
The country is ready, businesses are ready.
The differences in standards and the changes premiers are calling for. Courtroom chaos. What ignited this brawl? And who is this baby shark's daddy?
Immaculate conception.
The mystery of the fish that reproduced by herself.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. It is an idea that violates international law, has been described as amounting to ethnic cleansing, and has no support from Israel's neighbors or its allies. Yet U.S. President Donald Trump claims everyone loves his proposal to take over Gaza, permanently remove the Palestinians who live there, and develop it into what he calls the Riviera of the Middle East.
We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out.
The idea was swiftly rejected by American allies and adversaries, among them the UK, Germany, Iran, China, Russia, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Egypt. To Trump, Gaza is real estate. To Palestinians who were born and raised there, who've buried their loved ones there, it is home. And losing it would mean the end of any lingering hope of a Palestinian state. We are here, this man says, sitting in our land, on top of the rubble, on top of the ruins. We will rebuild it with our own hands. We'll have more from Gaza in a moment, but our coverage begins tonight with Jackson Proskow and Trump's takeover plan.
The devastation in Gaza is nothing short of a humanitarian catastrophe.
I think the potential in the Gaza Strip is unbelievable.
A world away, the U.S. president, a former real estate developer, sees something else.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad. This could be so magnificent.
Trump's outlandish proposal for American control of Gaza came as he met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has rejected Palestinian sovereignty.
You can't live in Gaza right now, and I think we need another location.
And so there was no pushback, as Trump suggested expelling the roughly 2 million Palestinians from Gaza.
But I think all of them, I think they'll be resettled.
He has a different idea, and I think it's worth paying attention to this.
Later, Trump was asked if he would rule out deploying U.S. troops.
If it's necessary, we'll do that.
When pressed, the White House struggled to define what exactly the president is proposing.
That does not mean boots on the ground in Gaza. It does not mean American taxpayers will be funding this effort. It means Donald Trump, who is the best deal maker on the planet, is going to strike a deal with our partners in the region.
This is among the most brazen ideas Trump has ever floated.
Trump's position on Gaza is absolutely dumb, stupid, and illegal.
A major departure from decades of U.S. foreign policy, it also contradicts nearly everything Trump has said about U.S. involvement in the Middle East, leaving no clear sense of how serious he is.
Most certainly there's no plan behind this. And if there is, it's not a plan that has any connection to reality.
It was meant as I think, a very generous move, the offer to rebuild and to be in charge of the rebuilding.
The proposal is an extension of something Trump has hinted at for years. As with so many other issues, it's not clear if he's taking an extreme position in hopes of ultimately bargaining for something less. Donna.
All right, Jackson Proskow in Washington, thanks. There is support for Trump's vision from Israel's far-right nationalist politicians who have long believed Palestinians should be forced out of Gaza. Most of the rest of the world still supports the idea of a Palestinian state and is rejecting Trump's plan. Redmond Shannon has a reaction tonight.
The land where Donald Trump sees a, quote, long-term ownership position for the United States. Shadi Salameh and his children live in the ruins of Khan Yunis. Resettlement of Palestinians won't happen because national and ethnic identity is strongly rooted in this land, he says. For Rashad Mansour, displacement is not new. When he was a child, his family fled to Gaza from what is now southern Israel during what Palestinians call the Nakba, or catastrophe. We are staying here. Where else should we go? He asks. Trump has suggested the more than 2 million people in Gaza go to countries like Egypt and Jordan, both nations again rejecting that idea. Hamas says Trump has added fuel to the fire in the Middle East. The Palestinian Authority in the occupied West Bank says Gaza is Palestinian land, according to international law.
We are against any occupation, whether Israeli occupation or American occupation, to the Palestinian land.
Countries across a divided world have united in reiterating calls for a two-state solution. Saudi Arabia has said that is a prerequisite for normalizing ties with Israel.
It may well be that Trump ramps up the rhetoric so high that the Saudis say we will normalize to prevent Trump from sending troops, to prevent the Israelis from going back into Gaza.
Israeli conservatives openly welcomed Trump's proposal. Far-right former government minister Itamar Ben-Gvir saying, "Donald, this looks like the beginning of a beautiful friendship." Israel's ceremonial head of state, President Isaac Herzog, praised Tuesday's White House meeting, but avoided commenting directly on Trump's Gaza proposal. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
A little later, Palestinians living in Canada tell us why Gaza will always be their home.
No justice, no peace, no...
Thousands of Americans in cities across the U.S. are holding anti-Trump rallies today. Protesters denounce Trump, Elon Musk, now a trusted Trump advisor, and Project 2025, the 900-page policy wish list on how Trump can reshape American government. In Washington, Democratic lawmakers joined protests over the dismantling of the U.S. Agency for International Development.
Elon Musk paid over $250 million to help elect Donald Trump. And now Donald Trump is turning over the keys to the Treasury and the rest of the federal government to Elon Musk. We need to end this illegal power grab.
Musk has been given an astonishing level of power by Trump, gaining access to highly sensitive data, including the U.S. Treasury's payment systems. His aim is to cut programs considered wasteful and not aligned with Trump's agenda. Canada's premiers intend to go to Washington next week to make their case on why Trump's threat to impose tariffs will hurt Americans as well as Canadians. Trump has given Canada a reprieve until March the 4th, and today the premiers and the Prime Minister held another virtual meeting to come up with strategies, including how to rapidly improve trading relationships between the provinces so companies don't have to rely so heavily on the U.S. David Akin is exploring that. David.
Well, Donna, there's economists who say dropping internal trade barriers could add billions to Canada's overall GDP. And in the wake of Trump's tariff threats, there is a new urgency to deal with those barriers.
I can tell you, having spoken to a number of premiers, the premiers are ready, the country is ready, businesses are ready.
And that's why Ottawa and the provinces are confident some barriers can be rapidly removed.
So you're going to see these barriers coming down, and there is no need for legislation in order for that to happen.
We are not the enemy.
Talks among the Prime Minister and the Premiers focused on three themes. First, harmonizing trucking regulations that can be wildly different from province to province. Second, improving labor mobility by making sure professional credentials earned in one province are honored by another. And third, removing some of the hundreds of exceptions, like liquor store sales, that each province insisted on when the Canadian Free Trade Agreement was signed in 2017.
The federal government is committed to us that they'll knock off as many barriers as possible. We'll do the same, and every other province will do the same. We need to have free trade right across this country.
But premiers also had their own demands of the Prime Minister. Some pressed Ottawa to streamline or reduce regulatory approvals to get big infrastructure projects moving. And some pressed Trudeau to name that fentanyl czar as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister said that he would convene a one-day Canada-U.S. economic summit this Friday in Toronto, where business and union leaders, as well as policy experts, will be asked for their ideas to grow Canada's economy without America's help. Donna.
Okay, David Akin, thank you. Why so many barriers to interprovincial trade exist is curious. Nobody knows them better than truckers and companies that deliver goods across the country. Taria Isri walks us through some of the roadblocks to trade within Canada.
Every time truck drivers cross provincial lines, they face a new set of regulations.
The West Coast is a lot different than Ontario, Quebec, and then you get New Brunswick, Nova Scotia. It's a whole different ballgame.
Roch La Victoire was a long-haul truck driver for 20 years and wants to see internal barriers slashed.
It would make life so much easier for these guys.
Those differences trickle down to other industries.
A major issue that grain farmers face is the trucking of their grain between provinces. So different provinces have different weights that they allow.
The patchwork of regulations across the provinces often reduce productivity and raise prices. One study found that internal trade barriers add an additional 8% to freight costs, which are ultimately passed down to the consumer.
It's just so many. It's death by a thousand cuts.
Some barriers are well known, like the flow of alcohol, but there are others. Different standards for meat, maple syrup, work boots, even toilet seats at construction sites.
Not every province has the same barriers as another, but they're equivalent to 21% tariffs. So for Quebec's case, it's actually 25% tariffs.
It's not just the flow of goods that are affected, but also people.
There's all kinds of reasons, safety reasons, accreditations. A lot of these decisions are held at the provincial level.
But doing so is not without political costs, especially for industries that may lose their competitive edge in certain provinces. But business leaders say the country as a whole is losing out.
This crisis that we're in, even in the interim, is an opportunity for us to have those conversations and get commitments from governments.
One less roadblock as Canada looks to become more self-reliant in the face of an existential threat. Taria Isri, Global News, Ottawa.
The RCMP is revealing details about 3 incidents at border crossings in Alberta and Manitoba. One of them involves migrants being intercepted last month. Infrared footage shows 6 people as they crossed illegally from the United States into Canada. It's the first time we've seen the RCMP using its resources this way at the Canada-US border. Mercedes Stephenson reports.
On a freezing cold night in January, as temperatures dipped into the -20s on the Manitoba prairies, half a dozen heat signatures materialized out of the cold and onto the RCMP's radar. 6 people crossing from the U.S. into Canada, and while they were under the cover of darkness, they were not entirely out of sight. This video was captured by a secret RCMP plane, hovering in the air above with advanced thermal detection technology on board. It is so detailed you can see the individual paths the people have taken. The prospective migrants first trying to hide when they hear the RCMP approaching, and then running into the forest. Here you see 2 Mounties in hot pursuit, guided by the RCMP officers in the plane above. The migrants are intercepted and arrested. The plane is classified, so we can't show it to you, but it is used in national security operations. These days, it is spending more time on the border. Donna, the RCMP say the migrants in this particular case came from Jordan, Chad, Mauritania, and Sudan, and they were not dressed for the freezing temperatures, something the Mounties raised concerns about today at their press conference.
When our members did approach these individuals, that they were not prepared for the Canadian weather. They did not have hats, gloves, mitts, or anything that we would normally see in a Canadian winter.
And Donna, you know, as a Manitoba girl yourself, how dangerous it is to be crossing, even when you know the territory, not dressed properly. So there's a lot of humanitarian concern here as well.
Yeah, certainly. And Mercedes, the RCMP rarely release surveillance video like this. What do you think is behind it?
It's really about trying to send a message strategically south of the border so that the American president and those around him see all of the efforts, as well trying to communicate to those who might be thinking about trying to cross the border that it might be a bit of a fool's errand because you're much more likely to be caught than you used to be, and also communicating to Canadians. These are 3 almost back-to-back incidences of incursions into Canada. That's not what Donald Trump is typically worried about, Donna. He's worried about going into the U.S., but from a Canadian national security perspective, Canadians are concerned about who's coming here.
All right, Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thank you. Law and disorder coming up, why a fight broke out in this courtroom. RCMP in Saskatchewan say they believe 4 people killed on the Carry the Kettle Nakota First Nation on Tuesday were targeted.
We don't believe that it's a random incident that occurred. We are working towards identifying suspects that we will be able to hopefully charge in the future.
Mounties say there will be an increased police presence in the community that's about 85 kilometers east of Regina as the Major Crimes Unit takes over the investigation. 4 adults, 2 men and 2 women, were found dead inside a home on the First Nation just before noon on Tuesday. Last night, RCMP say a 29-year-old man was arrested in connection to a firearms report in the region, but they have not confirmed if the incident is related to the homicides. In New Mexico, a court hearing about a murder case spiraled out of control. As the defendant stood before the judge, the victim's uncle got up from the gallery, jumped over a partition and lunged at the suspect. The victim's father then followed, and they all ended up in a pile on the floor. A number of punches were thrown, and the murder victim's uncle and father are now facing assault charges. The suspect is accused of fatally shooting his ex-girlfriend last year. He has pleaded not guilty. Transport Canada is recalling several models of Toyota and Ford vehicles. 4 Toyota models manufactured in 2023 are part of the recall, including the Tacoma, Highlander, Corolla, and Corolla Cross. The recall warns of a cable issue that could prevent the driver's airbag from deploying. A recall was also posted for Ford Broncos manufactured between 2021 and 2024. There is a risk external reservoirs could detach from the vehicle. Ahead, why Gaza will always be home. Palestinian Canadians speak to us about their hope to return. Gaza is a special place for Palestinians. Thousands of families ended up there after being displaced from their land when the State of Israel was created. And Palestinians who now call Canada home say they too dream of going back. Heather Yurix-West spoke with 2 of them about the land they say will always be home.
It was once a piece of paradise overlooking the Mediterranean, the land where Omar's family farmed strawberries and flowers for export to Europe.
I already lost almost everything in the Gaza Strip, but I am not willing to lose the land. It's a matter for us of existence.
Omar says he emigrated to Canada to get an education and rebuild his international business. But his plans have always been to return to Gaza. The president has now reinvigorated his resolve.
My plan to be in Canada was not forever, was not permanent. Now I think I need to accelerate this plan to return back and rebuild my city and my own neighborhood, our businesses back home.
Omar's parents and many extended family members still call Gaza home. Though they're now returning to cities flattened and homes in ruins, he says not one of his relatives would leave Gaza on their own accord.
Their main thinking is like, we're not leaving. We're either dying here on the ripples of our own houses, or we're just rebuilding it when we get the chance to.
This is 2 million people in Gaza.
Mohammed Al-Halis agrees that many Gazans will never leave their home. Now a Calgary business owner, Al-Halis grew up in Gaza City, a place he says his mother and many other relatives will remain, even though their homes have been destroyed.
Gaza like a soul, like a heart. Our people prefer to die in Gaza more than to move or leave Gaza for somewhere else.
Al-Halis hopes to one day return as well. In his heart, he says, Gaza will always be his home. Heather Yurix-West, Global News, Calgary.
The late Aga Khan's eldest son, Prince Rahim Al Husseini, is taking over from his father. The 53-year-old will be the 50th hereditary Imam of millions of Ismaili Muslims. The 49th Aga Khan, who died Tuesday in Portugal, had close ties to former Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. The Aga Khan is considered by his followers to be a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. Virgin shark birth. Next, how a baby shark was born despite living in an all-female tank. They say it takes 2 to tango, but that doesn't seem to be the case at a Louisiana aquarium. A baby shark has been born in a tank there that contained no male sharks. Heidi Petrachik explains the rare phenomenon that made it possible.
life finds a way.
Jurassic Park may have said it best, but the idea new life could emerge in a world without males isn't just for Hollywood movies. Take baby Yoko, a swell shark born in January at the Shreveport Aquarium.
The egg was found, strangely enough, under a rock. We didn't witness the mother actually lay the eggs, so we have two females, so we don't know which female actually laid the egg.
Thing is, there are no swell shark fellas at the aquarium. And the two girls came from another facility 3 years ago, which was also ladies only.
So it's been over a decade since they potentially ever encountered a male.
Immaculate conception. No.
He's pulling our fin, of course. There are actually two possible explanations. The first,
parthenogenesis, and it's actually known in a whole variety of animal species.
Parthenogenesis is Greek for virgin creation and happens when the female's body uses its own genetic material instead of a sperm to create a new critter. It happens in insects like tiny aphids and lizards as big as the imposing Komodo dragon.
They get together and they make an egg, which basically then develops and goes through division and becomes a little baby shark.
This is a kind of a last-ditch effort. If you've been deprived of any opportunities to mate and you're getting close towards the end of your life, maybe a female makes a decision that this is the way to go, the only way it's going to happen.
That evolutionary drive to survive also behind the other possibility, one for all the long-term planners out there, or what you could call nature's way of making up for a less than ideal dating scene.
There are a number of shark species that can store sperm for extended periods of time. We're talking up to 4 years.
Kind of like a shark sperm bank, saved until the female decides it's time. A DNA test will confirm exactly how Yoko came to be, a little shark born against the odds, now capturing attention around the world. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. Tonight's Your Canada is the Chateau Frontenac in Quebec City. Thanks for watching and hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.